Huh?
We're waiting. We're waiting. It's okay. It's all right.
Me?
It's only 2:01.
No, we're saying nobody.
It's only 2:01. Nobody's in that territory.
When did you get Saturday.
She used to work with us.
Chris
Judge McGrath.
Judge McGrath, excuse me.
I can call him Chris, you can call him Chris.
Doing meetings, but I saw the truth. Really, it was good. Buddy, how are you?
Good.
Sorry, I'm just going to capture your words. Okay. Ben, I was thinking.
Beautiful day, huh?
Your staff emailed me this. Whatever you need. Whatever you need.
Thank you. You were help, big help with my 9/11 ceremony with my supervisor.
Right.
That was the plan. Go in the office.
So you're out there at halftime, right?
First, I guess it was the first timeout. Yeah, media timeout. You gotta see if we can
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Where's Kirsten?
We're still waiting.
I think we should wait.
Yeah. Yes, I think. Definitely.
I know who I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
Hey, great to see you. Thank you.
Nice to see you again. So
Pleasure. Pleasure.
Here we go.
There she is.
You're late.
We're ready.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. I want to thank Senator Schumer for leading in this effort from the very beginning and never giving up. I want to thank Congress members Garbarino, Goldman, and Gillen who are here, who are standing by to continue to fight for our 9/11 first responders and all the families that live at Ground Zero. I also want to thank our advocates, including John Fiel, for the extraordinary work they've done on the ground for the past 20 years, every year making a difference, coming here, demanding action by members of Congress. We also have Thomas Hart, who is the president of Citizens for the Extension of the James Zadroga Act and president of Local 94 International Unit of Operating Engineers. Andrew Ansbro, president of the Uniformed Firefighters. Jim Brosey, president of Uniformed Fire Officers Association. Frank Conti, president of the Port Authority Police Benevolent Association. Ben Shavat, executive director of 9/11 Health Watch. And Mariama James, the survivor, who will tell us her story. We all have a story from 9/11. I lived in a very tall apartment building on East 39th Street. We could see the plume of smoke coming from Ground Zero for weeks after the towers fell. We didn't think it was safe to breathe. We were afraid. We didn't know what was going to happen to our great city. But the ones who weren't afraid were our 9/11 heroes. The ones who were never afraid were the ones who raced up the towers when everyone else was coming down. The ones who never gave up were the ones who were there day in, day out looking for remains and then doing the awful work of cleaning it up. The people who lived at Ground Zero were afraid, and they wanted to know what was going to happen next. Mariama James was one of those women, one of those people. She was a pregnant mom. And when 9/11 happened, she came home to see her apartment covered in a thick coat of ash. Since then, 3 of her children have developed life-changing respiratory conditions. John Field never gave up. He was a demolition supervisor for the cleanup at Ground Zero. He worked 5 days straight before a steel beam fell and crushed his foot, eventually requiring a partial amputation. Since then, he's had scores of surgery and still suffers from arthritis, chronic problems in his hips, knees, and lower back. But yet he comes to Washington time and time again to make sure senators listen to the men and women who sacrifice so much, to demand that they and House members do the right thing. Andrew Ansbrough's here. He just joined the FDNY when the attacks occurred. He was in the lobby of the World Trade Center's Marriott Hotel when the South Tower collapsed onto it. He barely survived. 3 months later, Andrew learned that his lung capacity had tanked, and it hasn't recovered since. These are just a few of the thousands of people who sacrificed, suffered, and so many died on 9/11 and have died since that date. Congress helped to create the World Trade Health Center program in 2011 to help these first responders, to help the survivors get the health care they need. It's been a lifeline for thousands of Americans from all across the country. Unfortunately, the initial funding formula did not accurately account for the cost of medical inflation. We all know what inflation feels like. Well, medical inflation is higher than any other kind of inflation. So the program has struggled to keep up with the cost of care. To address this over the past few years, a bipartisan coalition has delivered more than $1.6 billion to address those shortfalls. But these are just patches. We have to fix the formula and fix it once for all. Unless we do, by October 2028, the program will be forced to close enrollment for any new 9/11 responders and survivors, and existing enrollees will face direct cuts to their care and denied medical monitoring and treatment. So this bipartisan bill will update the outdated formula. It will make sure we have enough funding to get us to 2090. This bill will also increase the funding for data collection on 9/11 related conditions and expanded access to mental health care for our program members. I'm grateful to everyone who's standing here with me today. Sadly, for many of us here, some of our best and brightest are no longer here with us. We've made a promise that we will never forget, and we will keep fighting for this. I now want to introduce our next speaker, which is Senator Schumer, who has been leading this fight from the very beginning and never, ever has given up.
Well, thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Thank you for your great work. This has always been a passion of Senator Gillibrand's, and she has never, never given up on this and fought successfully year after year after year. So thank you so much. And I also want to thank all the others who were here, Congressman Gillen, Congressman Goldman, Congressman Gabarino, any other legislators. I think a few others are coming. And I want to thank our 9/11 heroes and advocates. Kirsten gave their history, so I'll just mention them. Tom Hart, President of Citizens for the Extension of the James Zadroga Act, and Local 94, the operating engineers, a great union. John Field, who's been here all the time and never given up and never let anyone else give up. Our firefighters, including Jim Brosey, President of Local 94, Andrew Ansbrough, my dear friend, was mentioned, head of the UFA, Local 854, Frank Conti from the Port Authority. We all remember those harrowing moments on 9/11. I remember flying back, President Bush sent aircraft, and smelling the death in the air, seeing so many people lined up with little signs. I'll never forget this. Have you seen, because we didn't know who was alive and who was dead, have you seen my sister Mary? Have you seen my father James? Lined up like 1,000 people walked by. And most of them were gone, very few, hardly anybody survived. But in that horror, one of America's darkest hours, we saw the best of America. In the days and nights that followed, the brave heroes, the first responders who risked their lives to help others, who ran to danger, knowing that they might hurt themselves, either right there in the pile or later. But they kept coming and helping and showed up day in, day out. Of course, now we have learned that the heroes and survivors suffered an unexpected and unimaginable cost, lifelong injuries, serious cancers, so many of them that help prove the case, occurring that never occurred before in people of a young age, but we knew the poisons in their system that they ingested in 9/11 caused them. and many, of course, are not with us any longer. I remember them as they trod the halls to try and pass legislation. We brought them into the halls of people, senators, who were not even from the area, but their case was so strong. I remember my dear friend Ray Pfeiffer. I think of him all the time. He's now gone, but I know Ray. He's looking down on us. He's smiling. He's glad we're here. So together we fought hard to ensure America paid them back for their service and established the World Trade Center Health Program to help our 9/11 heroes get care at no cost to them or their families. And as Kirsten mentioned, cost is so expensive these days. But sadly, the program struggled with funding over the years. When I first was able to pass this with Tom Coburn, John and others remember that, he said, we wanted to make it permanent then so we'd never have to come back. And he said, well, I'll do 5 years. And we thought we wouldn't get anything done, and he was standing in the way. So we were glad for the 5 years, but the 5 years meant that we had to keep coming back and back and back and back. So we've had to keep fighting. We secured $1.7 billion for the program in the past 3 years, extending its life now to 2028. It wasn't easy. Everyone had to come down again and again and again and again and again, and thank you for doing that. You've never given up. But today we're here to break that cycle once and for all. Once and for all. And that is to fund it permanently, now and forever, so they won't have to come back again. But much more importantly than them, they're generous, they're here. Families won't have to worry. If somebody gets sick in 2027, will there ever be money for me in 2029? They worry about that. And people who are sick now worry. Because, you know, with God's help, they'll be living a few years longer. The stakes are high. More people are diagnosed every day. And we know these cancers can show up 10, 20, 30 years later. So it's time for America to put its money where its mouth is and prove to the heroes of 9/11 that we mean it when we say we will never forget. It's not that we'll forget. We won't forget for 5 years or 7 years or 8 years, but never forget. That means permanent, permanent, permanent. Plain and simple. The bill was supposed to pass last year. Those of us here work day in, day out, both those in office and those who helped us. All 4 leaders agreed. We got all 4 leaders to agree to permanence. But then Elon Musk tweeted to sink the bill, and Trump asked the House Speaker to kick the can down the road. Well, the government funding deadline is now next month. And we're asking President Trump should go back to the previous bipartisan agreement we had and urge it be included in this permanent funding. We urge him to urge this permanent funding be included in this appropriations bill. Let's get this done once and for all. Enough with the games. It's not fair to have our 9/11 responders live in fear that there might not be money there. And one other point. If you think this fear is not real, look what happened last week. Look what happened last week when DOJ cut the CDC funding for the 9/11 health research, and workers from the program who were valiantly helping our 9/11 survivors were fired. So it makes it very real how ephemeral this could be. Well, bipartisan. Thank you, Congressman Gabarino. We all asked that the workers be rehired, and thankfully, President Trump listened. Now he's got to listen again, so we don't go through this ever again, and stand up and say that any appropriations bill should include permanent funding. As one of the 4 corners, I'm going to fight real hard to get it in. We had all 4 leaders a few months ago. We should have them again. Let's pass the bill. Let's make it permanent. I promise to all those who are here, I promise to Ray And all those who've been lost and fought for this, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this is the permanent bill. And we'll only have one more press conference to announce that we have a permanent bill, and you don't have to come back anymore. Thank you. And now, next to speak is Representative Garbarino.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. We have come together with a shared purpose to stand up for the health and well-being of the 9/11 responders and survivors who have borne the weight of that tragic day for more than 2 decades. We all heard Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer's story. I was a high school student back when 9/11 happened, and I remember being in school, and we didn't have iPhones back then. Information was scarce. I remember watching it on TV as the towers fell at school. It was awful. The World Trade Center Health Program is a lifeline to those who continue to battle the long-term health effects of those horrific attacks. It is the delivery of a promise that we intend to uphold. While we've chipped away at the program's funding shortfall, our work is far from over. All of us have stood in front of podiums like this one too many times before, calling for a fix that will ensure uninterrupted health care for our 9/11 heroes and survivors. We made a promise to never forget and will not allow those who answer the call to be left without access to care. We want this to be the last time we have to make this appeal. Today, along Senator Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, my House co-leads, advocates, survivors, I'm proud to announce the reintroduction of the 9/11 Responder and Survivor Health Funding Correction Act. This is not a New York issue. It's an American issue. The World Trade Center Health Program now serves over 137,000 responders and survivors from the World Trade Center attacks, the Pentagon, and Shanksville crash site. It reaches across all 50 states and touches 434 of 435 congressional districts. These figures remind us that the impact of that day spans our entire nation. I also want to thank everyone standing up here behind me. Your tireless efforts have been a beacon of hope for countless families and individuals. The dedication of this community is the driving force behind our progress and will ensure that we secure the care our responders and survivors deserve. We cannot wait for the funding gap to push us into a crisis before we act. Our responders and survivors deserve the peace of mind that comes that they know they will continue to receive the care that they were promised. Today, we renew that commitment with unwavering determination and resolve. Together, we will ensure that this promise endures for every survivor and hero who answered the call on that fateful day. Thank you all very much again for being here, and I'd like to introduce Representative Goldman.
Thank you very much to Congressman Garbarino for partnering on this. Thank you to our great senators, Congresswoman Gillen, for joining us now in, once again, reintroducing this bill. We obviously should not be here. It was included in the bipartisan end-of-year government funding bill that we had in December before, unfortunately, it was taken out at the last minute. But this is through no fault of these brave people back here and the 137,000 people who are now part of the World Trade Center Health Program. They deserve health care. No one would have predicted, especially those who went into Ground Zero when they were told that it was perfectly fine, that we would have so many significant and life-threatening illnesses that would arise out of that attack. There are now more people who have died from illness derived from 9/11 and those attacks than there are people who died that day. This is a moral imperative. It is an imperative for any American to repay the debt, but simply by paying for health care caused by this terrorist attack. It should not be a difficult issue. I am encouraged that we had bipartisan support at the end of the last year, and I am hopeful that President Trump, who was there at 9/11 for the memorial service this past September, will recognize the essential importance that this bill presents to pay back those who sacrificed everything to help to save our city and save others at Ground Zero. So I thank you all for being here. I thank so many of the advocates who keep this going and keep this alive. I would very much like to see you again, just not here. And now I want to introduce Congresswoman Gillen.
Well, thank you, Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer. I'm grateful for your leadership in finding a permanent fix for the World Trade Center health program. I'm so privileged and honored to work in a bipartisan fashion with Representative Garbarino and Representative Goldman, and I thank them for their advocacy and their leadership on this issue. Thanks again to John Field, Thomas Hart, Andrew Ansbro, Jim Brosi, Frank Conti, and Mariama James, who have shared their stories with us, and for their tireless advocacy for the 9/11 community. As it has been said already, we will never forget that dreadful day. I, like Mariama, was a pregnant mother on my way to work just a few blocks from the World Trade Center when I looked out my apartment window and I saw the World Trade Center on fire. After that horrible day, I went to work blocks from the World Trade Center, and they told us that the air was safe and it was safe to breathe. And now I live in fear of what could happen to me and to my daughter, who was born just a few months later. We can't forget the heroes who went into that building on that day to try to rescue people, or who went to the pile afterwards, like my friend Dan Morrissey, who would take an hour out of his workday every single day to dig on the pile to try to get closure for some of the families who lived in my district and lived throughout New York State. A few years later, Dan became really, really sick, and they didn't know what was wrong with him. And his family went through test after test trying to find out what was wrong with him. And eventually they discovered it was a rare cancer, unique to people who worked on that pile, who went to rescue folks on that dreadful day, and for people who were just normal citizens breathing in that air. Dan is no longer with us, but there are thousands of people who still are and who have survived. And we must not turn our backs on those folks. We must honor our commitment to the heroes who had our nation's back on that dreadful day, and let them know that we have their back. And this shouldn't be something that we have to come back and beg for every couple of years. It should be permanent. We should let those families know that we will support them if they have need in the future. So thank you. I'm so proud to work with all of you today. Now I'm going to introduce Andrew Ansbro, President of the Uniformed Firefighters Association.
Thank you, Representative Gillian. And my name is Andrew Ansbro. I represent 20,000 active and retired New York City firefighters. And I'm here to tell you about my experience with the program. As you heard earlier, 9/11 was my first fire. My lung test a few months later showed that I was lost 25% of my lung capacity. It's improved slightly, but not much. But there are thousands of members in situations that are so much worse than mine, and so many members that are dying. There are only about 1,000 or so New York City firefighters that are even left on the job from 24 years ago when that day happened, and thousands of them are sick. On that day, we lost 343 New York City firefighters. Since then, the number of those that are dying from cancers is increasing. We're at the number about 390 firefighters have passed from cancers since then, and the number of sick and those in hospice continues to grow. This funding is absolutely necessary. We have members that fathers burying sons and sons burying fathers, and we keep coming down here to try to get this funding to see to it that everyone has health care so that their families don't have to go into financial hardship and suffer through paying the bills as they're preparing for their loved one to die. When I came down here 10 years ago, a friend of mine I came down with was firefighter Bob Alexander, and Bob was going around telling 11-related cancers because Bob had a brain tumor, and it was a race to the grave to see who was going to die first, and the family didn't want to see the father bury the son. They both died within 9 months of each other, and the World Trade Center healthcare program provided for their health care. And the situation is playing out all over New York City for our firefighters that are still sick and dying. My father was a police chief on 9/11 while I was in the lobby of the Marriott. He was at the command post with the rest of the chiefs and the mayor. He narrowly survived the collapse, and we buried him a year and a half ago from 9/11 related cancer.
Everyone behind us, we've buried friends, many of us have buried family members, and we're asking, and we're trying to educate the new members of Congress and the Senate that this is what this means. Some of you may not have been here the last time we reauthorized payment, but this is what's going on. New York City firefighters, but also police officers, construction workers, civilians that live down there, they're still sick and dying. Almost every district in the nation has someone that's in this program, and we're here to see to it that everyone in Congress and the Senate is well aware of what this means. Slogans were made and promises were made to never forget what happened that day and always take care of those people that are involved. And this is the fulfillment of that promise, to reauthorize this payment, to get this passed, to see to it that everyone's taken care of. And we were down here in December when the continuing funding was supposed to go in continuing resolution, and we shook hands. It was a done deal. And then we went from the photo op over to Carol Maloney's portrait unveiling to thank her for her life's work of everything she's done for the 9/11 related community. And as we're unveiling the portrait in the other room, we're finding out that the bill was getting killed that would have made this funding permanent. It was a surreal experience as she's being honored for all of her work that she did for 9/11 first responders and the 9/11 community and then the construction workers and the residents. The bill was getting killed in the other room, killed by a tweet from someone who was unelected. And again, we can't let that happen.
What's the first letter of his last name?
Yeah, we all know. And a couple of weeks ago, trying to cut funding, cut corners, they cut 9/11 funding, and it's just not possible that they should even think to do it. It's unthinkable that they would cut funding to the 9/11 community. Fortunately, the mistake was acknowledged and reversed, and now we're here to acknowledge the mistake that was made in December and see to it that this funding bill goes through and that the 9/11 community is taken care of until this thing is seen through. I believe it's 2090 is the end of the bill, and by then we believe America will fulfill its promise as long as they take care of the health care for our people. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Brosey, the president of the Uniform Fire Officers Association.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. On behalf of the Uniform Fire Officers, I'd like to thank the New York delegation, both past and present, for their countless, tireless efforts to try to get this funding permanent so that our people are properly protected. Unfortunately, every time I come down here and I ask how we're doing, the most common phrase I hear is, it's difficult. It's difficult to pass. It's difficult to get the bipartisan support. It's difficult to foot it into the budget. Let me tell you what's more difficult. Burying nearly 400 firefighters since the event. Nearly 100 people currently in acute cancer care just for the New York City Fire Department alone. 6 members who are currently in hospice waiting to die. Seeing the son or daughter of a firefighter who since passed away growing up without a parent. Watching somebody spend most of the majority of their time in and out of Sloan Kettering trying to get appropriate treatment. Watching your own father die from 4 different types of cancer over an 8-year period. Watching your own brother suffer from lung ailments that makes it difficult oftentimes to go out in changing temperatures. That's what's difficult. This isn't difficult. We've built this mousetrap. We have a very good program in place. People like Ben Shavada spent countless years trying to put together a program to make sure that not only was there adequate testing, not only was there routine medical monitoring, but that when members got sick, they would actually get access to some of the best care. Because realistically, the only thing that makes this less difficult is knowing that exists. And the ripple effect of that recent cut that came only a few days ago brought countless calls to both unions wondering, would they still be covered? Would they still get access to that care? Would their prescriptions still come in the mail? This is the one disruption these people do not need. Remember, everyone thinks this might be just a civil servant issue or a first responder issue. Take it from somebody who spent the countless days at the pile. The people we're turning our back on are not just police officers. They're not just firefighters. They're not just iron workers. They're every single person who thought, as was mentioned before, to take their time off knowing that air was contaminated, to volunteer whatever skill set they had in order to make this a more bearable situation and bring some continuity and some closure to the people that were affected by this. If America turns our back on the people who are the best of humanity and strictly for a funding issue, not to build a new program, not to find new users, but just to support the people that are currently in the program, over 137,000, and those who may become affected, those children who went to Stuyvesant who are now growing into reproductive age where these cancers are being detected. These are the people we're turning our back on. We have the system, we have something in place, and it is our obligation to find the funding to give these people the peace of mind that when we were there for them, that you are there for us. So that is one less thing to worry as we move forward in the future. I thank you for your continued support, and mostly the New York delegation for all that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I now like to bring up one of our strongest advocates who has not given up one day, John Field.
Oh, boy. Can I have you guys stand over here?
Yep.
Please. Over here. I just want to call up any 9/11 responder to come forward.
Oh, nice. Yeah, good. Look at these nice people.
All you guys come forward. That's what cancer looks like. That's what COPD looks like. That's what pulmonary fibrosis looks like. That's what severe respiratory illnesses look like. That's what post-traumatic looks like. They're all dying. So media, interview them after this press conference. Don't interview these people. I love these guys. For what? But I'll tell you what's killing them even more. The toxic fucking redundancy of this place. The toxic redundancy of having to keep coming back. They have to keep telling their stories. Ask Ray Pfeiffer, Lou Alvarez. Oh, wait, you can't. They're dead. They died telling their stories. We continue to come back here for 20 years. Then we go to funerals. Then we go to hospital beds. This is real. Doge is not real. Fuck Elon Musk. Let me just say what everybody else is thinking. People are sick and people are dying. I love you guys. I don't want to see you no more. No more. We want to be left alone. Leave us alone. We keep playing defense. Where's the offense? We ask. No more asking. We're demanding. From Longworth to Hart to HHS to the White House. Now. Have a good day.
Thank you, John. I'd now like to bring up Thomas Hart, the President of the Citizens for Extension of the James Zadroga Act.
Good afternoon. I recently accepted the role of the President of the Extension of the Zadroga Act. My initial role was a business agent at Local 94, brought me down to that pile that morning. The things that we saw, the things that we experienced, and the things that we've had to live with are unimaginable. Someone told me to bring up the point that Elon Musk was living in Canada on the days of the attack of 9/11. And here he is dictating the policy for our people, our heroes, our victims, our everyday Americans that make this country great by the actions that they take. We all had a choice. Those of us were there was no choice. We were there, we weren't leaving. There was a job to do. Senator Schumer spoke about the smell. There are things that are coming up and boiling up inside me today. I have prepared notes. I'm not going to talk about my prepared notes. I'm going to talk about my experience. I'm going to talk about the efforts of these people. This man right here, family friend. I am so proud. He gave me a commitment on Christmas Eve at a family function. And I want to thank you publicly for keeping your word and doing what you do. We have completely different views. We are on the opposite sides of the aisle. But I'm happy to call him my friend. And I trust him. And I trust each and every one up here. Bipartisanship is something that everybody spoke about. If we don't get back to bipartisanship, there are people in the audience, you just have no idea what we're even talking about because you've grown up in a toxic environment down here. We don't work if we don't work together. It didn't matter if you were a Republican, a cop, a school teacher, a retiree. I talked about it everywhere I went in this country. It was a beautiful time. As much as it sucked, it was a beautiful time in New York because we all stood together and we all did what we had to do. Each and every one of us owe it to those that responded that day. I've been down here countless times with John and other people. I held a man in the men's room coughing up his lung. Parts of his lung are my body. The man came to testify. He died so short time after that. For Marvin, for the people that were mentioned, for the guys here that are sick. There's no way of putting a price tag on something that you don't know about. And believe me, if you weren't down there, there's no way to describe it. And it wasn't one day. We were there for years. Imagine what it's like to pick up a little kid's hands and put them in a body bag. If I have to bring it that gross and that much to you, the first thing that I seen was a pink sweater of a woman and her remains that looked like chopped meat. And I put them in a body bag. I didn't move one complete body from down there. Not one. I live with that. Thank God I'm still healthy. But I live with those things in my mind every single day. And when I come down here, I'm moved right now. It brought me back. I know, John, it brings you back to somewhere you don't want to be. So please, Mr. Trump, get Elon out of the way. 2019, you signed the same damn bill. We need it amended. It's not okay. No is not an answer. It needs to be done. Thank you for your work.
Bye. Thanks, Chuck. Give it to him.
Bye, everybody.
You're not mad. You did good job. Good job. Frank, our next
What'd he say?
speaker, don't be mad. Frank
I'm never mad. Can't stay mad at you.
Yeah,
Skeeter
I know.
Davis.
Yeah. Our next speaker is Frank Conti, the president of the Port Authority Police Benevolent Association.
Thank you very much. Senator Schumer, I hope you're not leaving on my account. All right, thank you. My name is Frank Conti. I represent the 1,700 active Port Authority police officers, and I represent approximately another 2,500 retirees. Every September 11th, Ground Zero is packed with our regional representatives. We reflect and we honor the heroes who lost their lives responding to the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Port Authority PD was hit fairly hard. We lost 37 members of our department and our police precinct, which was inside of the World Trade Center building. Since 9/11, we have lost an additional almost 20 officers, and we have some additional officers in the verification process as we speak. These 9/11 related conditions, clearly they're outnumbering those who died that day, which is why the WTC Health Program is so important. We were down here walking the halls in 2010, 2015, 2019, with Senator Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, and everybody who's standing behind me. I'm proud to be here with my fellow union members and advocates, because I know we're all down here for the same reason. This vital program facing a shortfall is just unimaginable. I don't think people should have to be reminded that it wasn't an attack on New York City or the Pentagon or Shanksville. This was an attack on the United States of America. Emergency workers, police, firefighters, tradesmen came from every corner of this country to assist and paid dearly with their health. As was already said, 137,000 enrollees in every one of our 50 states and in all but one of our 435 congressional districts have people enrolled in this program. This 9/11 Responder and Survivor Health Funding Correction Act must be fully funded and free of disruption. So on behalf of my members, I would like to thank Senator Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, Representative Garbarino, Nadler, Keene, Goldman for their efforts and their vow to never forget. So thank you very much.
Good job. I'm glad I stayed.
Yeah, likewise, Senator. Likewise.
Our last speaker is Mariama James, a survivor from the community.
Hi, my name is Mariama James. I'm a survivor and the daughter of two survivors who passed away from 9/11 related cancer. My dad, who was babysitting for me, and my mother, who lived in Harlem but was an employee of Deutsche Bank across the street from the towers. I'm also the mother of 3 young survivors, one of whom was in utero at the time of the terrorist attacks. We were told, or I was told, to remain in my apartment because I was so very pregnant and I live across the street from a hospital. So in October of 2001, her labor was induced. And within just months, she and her 2 siblings were all suffering from asthma-related conditions and seeing a pulmonologist on a monthly basis. Goodness, sorry. I'm one of those people who joined with other 6 survivors and responders to push for Zadroga. This is not nearly my first time in DC on this matter, but I sure hope it's my last. We're here today because we refuse to forget. And it's impossible to forget, as you've heard from others. These images are embedded in our minds. In 2006, my dad, my children, and I were part of what would be the first iteration of a photo series. That time it was put on Times Online. It's called 9/11 Still Killing, and this was the first volume, so to speak. James Zadroga was in it with his father, Joe, the woman known as the Dust Cloud Lady. Everyone in that photo spread, including my own father, is dead, with the exception of me and my kids. So we're here today because we refuse to forget this. We refuse to forget the agonizing, decade-long fight to get Washington to acknowledge and address the 9/11 health crisis affecting families, neighbors, friends, and so many others. We remember the tireless advocacy, the sheer relentless effort that it took to pass the Zadroga Act. In 2010, we finally passed it, and there were subsequent battles in 2015 and 2019 to extend it. I remember my own mom, who was basically ushered to her death when told to return to work at Deutsche Bank, or my dad, who's simply been shopping at a hardware store on Park Road near City Hall when the first plane hit. We remember the heroes, sick 9/11 responders who were forced to drag themselves down the halls of Congress with oxygen tanks and wheelchairs just to demand basic human decency. We honor Ray Pfeiffer and Luis Alvarez, men who should have been home, not fighting for their lives and the lives of others. Let's be clear, this is not just a New York issue. 9/11 responders came from all over, every corner of this nation. They served and they sacrificed and they returned home, only to face devastating consequences of their exposure. Survivors are now seeking care in North Carolina, Florida, California, everywhere. Today, the World Trade Center Health Program serves over 137,000 responders and survivors in all 50 states and 434 congressional districts. We cannot endure another funding crisis. We refuse to beg for the care we and the 9/11 heroes so desperately need. We will work with our senators and all the representatives so that we resolve this once and for all. We're grateful that the recent cuts have been restored, but this continual battle to protect this vital program needs to stop. Moving forward, we ask that Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., ensure the World Trade Center Health Program is protected from any and all further cuts or disruptions. The program must be allowed to fully staff, continue its vital research, and provide the care that we all deserve. We are united in our commitment to support the 9/11 Responder and Survivor Health Funding Correction Act of 2025. We thank Senator Gillibrand, Schumer, and Representatives Garbarino, Gillum, Malliotakis, Nadler, Keene, and Goldman for their unwavering dedication. And we welcome any other senators to sign on and join this vital cause. For them, never forget is not just a slogan, it's a solemn promise that they uphold every day. And as long as they support us and go hard for us, we will do the same for them. Thank you.
We're happy to take on-topic questions for any of the speakers or anyone up here. Go ahead. Correct. Yep.
Well, this was the original intent, and when this came out and created, it was done as mandatory spending, so it wouldn't come at the whims of politicians down here in D.C. having funding fights. The mistake was made, and it was quickly corrected. The White House responded after I called and everybody else called, the entire New York and New Jersey delegation. Again, there was a mistake made there. It should not happen again. This is mandatory spending. These people don't deserve what happened. The World Trade Center program, from everything I've been told, has zero fraud. That is not what DOJ is supposed to be going after. And like I said, that mistake was quickly corrected.
Go ahead, Tom.
Congressman Garbarino, when you talked to the president, did you bring up this, what you're trying to do now, that, to get what passed Congress that was knocked out?
Yeah, the White House knows that this is a priority for both Republicans and Democrats. Everybody who's a co-sponsor of this bill. The Speaker knows this is a priority. As you heard, there was a four-way agreement to get this done. I don't understand why there wouldn't be a four-way agreement to get it done in whatever next appropriations bills move. So again, this is a priority for us. This is a priority for Speaker Johnson, as well as Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand. I see nothing standing in the way of getting this included. We already had a four-way deal. I don't know what have changed that.
Would this be in the CR?
Procedurally, we would hope that it would be in there. Absolutely. I would put it in a bill that we're passing tonight if I could. To get this done as quickly as possible. It's already too late. We got to get it done now.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Obviously, this funding crisis is caused by inflation and medical costs. How is this legislation going to, make sure that inflation and medical costs doesn't continue and, that X factor?
Well, all we can do is trust the actuaries who do the analysis and tell us how much it costs. And so that's what we've done. And it's $3 billion, and that's what we're asking for. So I'm hopeful this is exactly what we need. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks again.